Alright, today we're going to be arguing for objective morality. And let's knock out some definitions to make sure we're on the same page first, starting with subjective and objective truth.
Subjective truth is something which is true for me, but not necessarily true for everyone. For example, when I say broccoli tastes good. If something is objectively true, it's true for everyone. For example, this pen exists objectively. It exists even if I didn't show it to you.
Now, there are also two types of knowledge we're going to be talking about, a priori and a posteriori knowledge.
A priori knowledge is knowledge which is self-evident, whereas a posteriori is knowledge which is learned through experience. It's basically knowledge you have to be taught.
Now, we all apprehend that we do have moral duties. The question is this apprehension merely a personal view, or is it an objective truth?
So when I have a moral obligation, is this objectively true in the same sense that I see a pen and the pen objectively exists, or is it true in the same sense that broccoli is good, that it merely tastes good for me and it is not an objective truth? So which is it?
Let's take a look. We have innate knowledge that our senses are accurate, also called a priori knowledge. See, nobody has to teach us that what we see actually exists or what we taste actually has taste. Now, it takes a realm of those innately shared truths to establish that something objectively exists. And that may sound a little confusing, but hopefully these examples will help.
Your senses tell you that broccoli is good, where mine say it's bad. This makes it impossible to say that broccoli is objectively good tasting. But our sense of sight is different. Unlike taste, we share a realm of innate truths when it comes to sight.
We innately believe that our sight experience informs us of reality. When it comes to taste, it's normal for me to think that one thing tastes bad and you to think that same thing tastes good because we're on a different standard of taste. When it comes to sight, if we both look at the same thing and I see a tree and you see a turtle,
I like turtles.
Well, one of us would be wrong. Because all normal humans with functioning eyes see the same thing, it is rational for us to trust that our sense of sight is accurate and conclude that what we see objectively exists.
So to put this really simply, humans can all look up and see the stars. Because we all see stars, rather than each of us seeing something different, it's rational to conclude that the stars are really there.
Now, before we start talking about morality, a quick distinction needs to be made between a priori and a posteriori knowledge. Let's say that it's objectively true that there's a man making a facial expression. Now, those of us who have good eyesight can look at that man and verify that he really exists using our a priori knowledge.
However, our a posteriori knowledge can lead us to conclude that we saw something different than the guy sitting next to us. In actuality, we both see the same thing, but you can think you see a man who is excited, and I can see a man who I think is angry.
Now, because we are both using the same standard of reality, one of us is simply in error. Reality doesn't differ, but our perception of reality can differ. It is important to note that not all disagreements are sufficient to prove that something is not objective.
Just because we disagree on what facial expression is being made, that does not call into question whether or not the man making the expression objectively exists.
So, here's the main argument. I think that our moral sense is more like our sense of sight than our sense of taste, and that it obligates us to believe in objective morality. Remember earlier when I showed that it takes a realm of innately shared truths to establish that something objectively exists? Well, not only do we have that for our sense of sight, but we have that for our moral sense. Among other things, our innate moral sense tells us things like killing an innocent man for fun is wrong. From this, it is logical to conclude that it is objectively wrong, and there is objective morality. Now, even though we have a priori knowledge that killing an innocent man for fun is wrong, some people's view can be changed with a posteriori knowledge, just like we used with the sight example.
So let's take Nazis for example. Stay with me for a second. Even Nazis believed that killing an innocent man for fun was wrong. However, they had been exposed to misinformation which led them to believe that Jews were not fully human, and they were a dangerous threat to humanity. From the Nazis' perspective, a posteriori knowledge convinced them that Jews were not innocent, and they were killing them for the good of humanity rather than for fun.
A posteriori knowledge can change our perception of reality, but it does not change reality itself. This example, and others like it, are not differences in a priori knowledge, and therefore have no ability to disprove objective morality.
Now, there are two objections that are going to be made, so let's address them now. The first being that psychopaths disprove objective morality, and the second being that evolution played a part in developing our moral sense, therefore it can't be true.
Alright, so let's go back to sight for a second. We all know that blind people do not disprove the validity of sight. Now, just because they cannot see, it doesn't mean that what we see doesn't exist. Now, if a blind man does not disprove the validity of sight, then a psychopath does not disprove objective morality for exactly the same reasons.
And the second objection, that evolution played a part in developing our moral sense, therefore it can't be true, commits the genetic fallacy.
Yeah, the genetic fallacy shows us that explaining how something developed doesn't tell us if that thing is true or false. For example, just because evolution played a role in developing our eyes doesn't mean that what we see isn't real. Similarly, just because evolution played a role in developing our moral sense doesn't make objective morality false either.
We can easily show that our sense of taste is not objective. If our sight experience or our moral experience was also not objective, there would be an easy way to show it.
Yeah, if we wanted to lose confidence in sight, all we need to do is have different a priori knowledge about what we see. If we're both exposed to some type of drugs, then we could see totally different things. For example, if I saw a star and she saw a jet, then we couldn't determine who, if either of us was right. But because we are not exposed to drugs and we do see the same things, we can conclude that what we see really exists.
Now let's put this in moral terms. If we wanted to lose confidence in our moral experience, we would need to have different a priori knowledge of moral obligations. That means when I recognize that we have a moral obligation not to kill an innocent man for fun, you would need to think we have a moral obligation to kill an innocent man for fun.
I first brought that point up in a chat room with a fellow YouTuber named Jasper Avi, and he posed this objection. He pointed out that some people think abortion is wrong and some people think it is right. But to go back to my first analogy, this is like agreeing that we both see a man making a facial expression but disagree on what expression was being made. See, pro-choice and pro-life supporters both innately agree that killing an innocent baby for fun is wrong.
It's the difference in a posteriori knowledge about whether or not the fetus is a baby that will lead them to come to different moral conclusions. Because both parties feel a moral obligation to help the baby and the mother, rather than a moral obligation to be malicious, this example actually supports our conclusion.
Yeah, ironically, we spend a lot of time arguing that the major differences in our morality are due to differences in a posteriori knowledge. However, that claim is not even necessary for making our case. As long as a realm of objective moral truths exists, objective morality has been demonstrated. Now, I don't claim that humans can know what is moral in every situation. But I do think that given the evidence, we have a duty to believe in objective morality and all that follows. So remember, God loves you, and so do I.
And as always, test everything, hold on to the good.